This week in CIST 1602, we'll look at Chapter 7 in Risk Management. We're treating the risk. First, we're going to look at an introduction to risk treatment. A couple things to remember in this: that to remain competitive, organizations must design and create a secure environment to which the business process and procedures can function and evolve effectively. So you think of something with a business, they have to have a competitive advantage. All right, so we're looking at what a competitive advantage is and how it's changed in the years since the IT industry began. First, I always say a competitive advantage that's when a business creates, an organization has its business model, method, or technique, and it allows it to provide a product or service that's superior to competitors. Now, how this has changed since the IT industry began, today, organizations operate at a similar level of automation. This is something that competitive advantage is something that happened really in the early days of IT systems. Now everybody's kind of on the same level playing field. What we ask now is, what is a competitive disadvantage, and why has this emerged as a factor? Competitive disadvantage, that's when that's the state of falling behind the competition. Now, why is it emerged as a factor? Because organizations today improve technologies to avoid loss of market shares, not to stay ahead of their competitors. So you must treat risk that is deemed unacceptable when it exceeds the risk appetite. So the treatment of risk begins by understanding of what risk treatment strategies are and how to formulate them. So when we go through this, so after the risk management process team has identified, analyzed, and evaluated the level of risk, inheritance information assets, which is its risk assessment. After that, it's going to start looking at how can we mitigate those risks. What is the acceptable risk versus too much risk? So once we go through, we get the rank vulnerability worksheet's been created. We've got 5 basic strategies that must be chosen to control risk: defense, transference, mitigation, acceptance, and termination. When we talk about defense, that's the risk treatment strategy. That's the application of safeguards that's going to eliminate or reduce the remaining uncontrolled risk. Transference is the risk treatment strategy of shifting the risk to other areas or outside organizations, outside entities. Mitigation, that's the reduction of the risk impact after a successful attack by preparing for its occurrence and the immediate actions needed to deal with the consequences of the attack. The risk treatment strategy of acceptance is understanding of the consequences and acknowledgments of the risk by the proper level of authority without any attempt to control that risk, that vulnerability. Termination, that's what the termination is: a risk treatment strategy. It's going to eliminate all the risk associated with the information asset because it's going to remove that asset from service. Now, we do have residual risk. That's the leftover risk that's not completely removed, shifted, or included in the planning as well, that we have to take into consideration. The defense risk treatment, that is the preferred approach. This will sometimes be called avoidance. And we do have 3 common approaches for the method of risk defense. This will be the application of policy, the application of set of programs, which is the training, education, and also the implementation of technology. You may also have um, the transferences where the organization doesn't have the adequate security management or administration experience. So in this case, they may decide to outsource the risk, the management of the risk. So this the organization chooses to hire either an ISP or a consulting organization. So they get the product, services, maybe something as server acquisition or configuration, web development, maintenance, administration, and even some of the InfoSec functions may be outsourced. So now you're transferring the risks associated with managing these systems to an organization that has the experience with those risks. You can also use outsourcing to shift the responsibility for disaster recovery, and you can do this through service level agreements. Now, when you've got a service level agreement, that's the key to effective transference risk control strategy, is make sure you have the effective service level agreement. So 4 steps you should take when creating a successful service level agreement. 1, you want to determine the objectives. What are you trying to accomplish by this agreement? You define your requirements, setting your measurements to judge whether the agreement is effective, and then establish accountability for the agreement. The mitigation risk treatment strategy, as we said, is focused on the planning and preparation to reduce the impact of an incident or disaster. So we really have 4 types of plans that we have in the mitigation strategy. You have your disaster recovery plan, an incident response plan, your business continuity plan, and then crisis management plan. And in those should spell out what should be done, what must not be done, who is responsible for completing each task, and then how can we get recovered. So the value from a mitigation, it's going to be from fixing the issue and how to recover as quickly as possible. The acceptance risk treatment strategies we said is you do nothing more beyond the current level of protection. And so you just accept the outcome from any resulting exploitation of the vulnerability. This is where you look and say, okay, it's maybe the cost of that asset is not, you can't justify the cost to protect that asset versus the value of the asset itself. So what conditions must be met to ensure that the risk acceptance has been used properly? So you can say that it's been used properly if the level of risk posed to the asset has been determined, the probability of the attack, and the likelihood of successful exploitation of the vulnerability has been assessed, the annual rate of occurrence of such attack has been approximatized, the potential loss that could result from the attack has been estimated, a thorough cost-benefit analysis has been performed, the controls using each appropriate type of feasibility has been evaluated, or it has been decided that a particular function, service, information, or asset did not justify the cost of protection. When you have met those, you can assume that the risk acceptance has been used properly. So with termination, this one is based on the organization's intentional choice not to protect an asset. Here, however, the organization does not wish the information asset to remain at risk, so it's going to remove it from the environment that represents the risk. So once again, sometimes the cost of protecting an asset may outweigh its value, or it's too difficult or expensive to protect an asset. So once again, compared to the value or advantage the asset offers the company. So the company would just remove the asset. So next we'll look at managing risk. All right, so risk appetite. That's the amount of risk an organization is willing to accept as it evaluates the trade-off between perfect security and unlimited accessibility. Now, this risk appetite is going to vary from organization to organization because of the difference in their size, their budgets, culture, and the value that's been placed on certain assets. Once again, keep in mind that the goal of InfoSec is not to bring a residual risk to zero, but rather to bring it in line with the organization's risk appetite. Now, once you put in a control strategy has been implemented, you need to make sure that it's very important to continue to monitor and measuring the controls of that strategy. This lets you determine the effectiveness of the need, and be aware of the need of documented control strategies for each asset threat pair. So a cost-benefit analysis, that is a evaluation of the anticipated losses that could be avoided from control efforts, which is the benefit, and compare that to the anticipated costs needed to implement the controls. So a cost-benefit analysis, it's analysis done to determine whether the value of an asset warrants its protection. When we talk about single loss expectancy, that's the calculated value associated with a sole occurrence, the most likely loss from an attack. So how much would your organization lose if this attack happened one time? Annualized loss expectancy is a calculated value associated with the most likely annual loss from the attack. So SLE is a one single time. ALE is if the annual loss. One of the things we look at is the annualized rate of occurrence. That's the probability of a threat occurring, and it's going to be depicted as a table that indicates how frequently an attack from each threat type is likely to occur within a given time. Now, the AROs indicate how often you expect a single type of attack to occur. And when we calculate our ALE, it's typically going to be expressed as the SLE times the ARO. So the annual loss expectancy is equal to the single loss expectancy times the annual rate of occurrence. Okay, so how many times that single attack is going to occur a year, that's going to give you your annual loss. Some other methods of establishing feasibility, organizational feasibility analysis. This examines which InfoSec programs will contribute to efficiency, effectiveness, and overall operations of an organization. You should understand that organizational feasibility analysis compares a control approach with an organizational strategic objectives. The operational feasibility analysis, this is described as involving acceptance and support by users and management, as well as a system compatibility with requirements maybe put forth by stakeholders. This is also going to be known as behavioral feasibility. Technical feasibility is it's the determination of whether or not an organization has the technology necessary to implement, support, and manage a program. Then we have the political feasibility analysis. It determines what can and cannot occur based on the consensus and relationships among the community's interest within an organization. We do have some recommended alternative risk treatment practices. One of the things is that we have the issue of valuing information assets and the dynamic nature of the ALE calculations. So organizations look for more straightforward methods to implementing controls. So as they're going through and looking for the different types of controls for specific information asset vulnerability. One of the things we can look at is a quantitative risk assessment. This can be used instead of the actual values or the estimates used for quantitative measures. So these assessments are useful in an organization that cannot determine the actual values. Microsoft also has its own risk management approach. So Microsoft defines risk as the probability of a vulnerability being exploited in the current environment, leading to a degree of loss of confidentiality, integrity, or availability of an asset. So Microsoft has 4 phases in the security management approach. It has the assessing risk, conducting decision support, implementing controls, and measuring the program effectiveness.